Great, we're moving right along. Our next speaker is Father John Dear, formerly of the Society of Jesus, now a Catholic priest, independent of the Jesuits, still working and living in California now. I knew him back in New Mexico 16 years ago. We actually did an event together at the Church of St. Francis of Assisi in Ranchos de Taos, which is the south side, El Barrio, the south side of Taos, New Mexico. He's the author of many books, including Jesus the Rebel, and an autobiography of his work as a protester against violence and war. He's probably been arrested about 30 times and doing civil disobedience. And it's so great to see you, Father John. Welcome back to, just welcome back to my life. Thank you for being here. Everybody give a silent cheer for Father John Dear. Woo! All right. Let me try to unmute you. Are you muted or are you?
I think I'm unmuted.
Good.
Hey, Sander, nice to see you. Hello, everybody. Hi, Kathy. Are you there?
She's there.
Hey, Sander, I've been arrested 85 times. You're selling me short, man. That's kind of a joke. So I am arrested 85 times. This is so nice to talk about Gandhi instead of stewing over the world. I just don't think we can talk about him enough. And as Kathy knows, I'm kind of a Gandhi fanatic. And I stew about nonviolence and Gandhi and Jesus morning, noon, and night. So I wanted to pose 3 questions and reflect on them with you, just as a kind of a personal sharing, because this is kind of where I'm at. And I don't know, Sander, if you're unmute yourself for a bit. I don't know, I can talk forever, but maybe I'll talk 15 or 20 minutes and then see if there's a question, since you're
that sounds great, yes. And yeah. I'm being a little bit goofy with the schedule, but yes, that sounds great.
Great. And yeah. Kathy, if Kathy wants to offer any rebuttal to what I say, she's very welcome.
Right. And also Edward De Jesus is also on deck. So I messed up on the schedule a little bit, but it's going to be fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. So I did this book, which you can't see, but it's Mohandas Gandhi Essential Writings. It's about 20 years old, dedicated to you, Kathy Kelly. And I read the 100 collected works of Gandhi and about now 50 other books. I'm still reading them every day, Sander. It's like I need medication. And then I've written 38 books now, Sander. And this one it's called The Nonviolent Life. It's kind of where I'm at on nonviolence these last 15 years. By the way, there's a church kind of like Ranchos de Taos on the cover. You can't see it. New Mexico on the bottom and Van Gogh on the top. It's very cool cover. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share. So here are my questions, and they're for all of us to ponder in this terrible moment, as Les was saying. How can we go deeper into nonviolence? I think that's the only, if Gandhi says nonviolence is the only hope and the only solution, I agree. And he talked a lot, I was reading this morning again, about nonviolence of the weak versus nonviolence of the brave. And he was being very nonviolent when he described it like that. I think, except for Kathy Kelly, we're all nonviolence of the weak. I've been in prison, but I just am not at the level that Gandhi talks about. I don't think, but I want to be. And I think we all want to be. And I think we got to redouble our efforts as the apocalypse is upon us. And so I mean personally, together, toward all human beings, all the creatures in the world. That's my first question. How can we deepen nonviolence? The second is, I think, a question is, how do we build up the global grassroots movement of nonviolence? So my thinking is always that social change only happens from the bottom up, people-powered grassroots movements of nonviolence. And King said Gandhi was the first person to unleash this in history. Gandhi would have said he learned it all from Jesus. And now we have thousands of movements, but we have to go way beyond Gandhi now. We need a global grassroots, bottom-up people power movement of nonviolence, the likes of which the world has never seen. That's what I heard Les talking about. I don't know what you think about that, Kathy. That's what has to happen. What are we doing about that? How do we help that? And third, how can we help teach and spread the wisdom and way of nonviolence? I think that's very important. Everywhere, to everyone, at every level. And it's the group I work with, Campaign Nonviolence. Ken Buddigan talks about how do we get nonviolence into the mainstream? It's an interesting question. I think Dr. King did it and Gandhi did it. I don't know if it can be done now. So let me first talk about how do we deepen nonviolence, but I invite you to reflect on it while I'm talking. It's not just a speech. And I'm just going to share what keeps pushing my button, a couple of Gandhi quotes. And these quotes I have had written down on my desk for 40 years, and I still don't know, Kathy, what they mean, and I'm still trying to work on it. So the basic, this is Gandhi always trying to describe and define nonviolence. I think in every talk I've given in my life, probably to 1 million people, I've always said, please go and try to define nonviolence, because that's critically important. Gandhi says, first, nonviolence means avoiding injury to anything, anyone on earth in thought, word, and deed. And that's just so hard. I'm at 61 and this gets harder, Sander. It doesn't get easier. And I'm working at it. And I think I'm getting worse, Kathy, as Kathy. But again, these quotes get worse. Second, nonviolence is the greatest and most active force in the world. That just kills me, because I think he's right. It's the way of God. So one person who can express the fullness of life, of nonviolence in life, exercises a force superior to all the forces of brutality in the world combined. That's just an astonishing thing that Gandhi said. All the weapons in the world, all the 16,000 nuclear weapons in the world, one person can have more power than them. And he proved it. And so did Jesus and many other people. How do we tap into that? And then this great teaching, my optimism rests on my belief in the infinite possibilities of the individual to develop or deepen nonviolence. And the more you develop it in your own being, he's talking about really going deep inside you, the more infectious it becomes, till it overwhelms all your surroundings and all the people around you, and then it overcomes the whole world through you. Wow. He's saying that's possible. And I've met a lot of people where it is possible, from Kathy to, my friend Thich Nhat Hanh. You won't mind me name dropping. Thich Nhat Hanh, a friend of mine, read a quote to me yesterday from him, and he said, we're all wrong about Gandhi. And only Thich Nhat Hanh could say that. And I've known Thich Nhat Hanh for 30 years, and he's Gandhi. He really has gone so deep. He's just the gentlest person I've ever been with.
Can I ask, what did he say?
Yeah, I'm trying to get up the courage to say what he said. Ken Buddigan was there, and Ken said, ouch. He said, the thing about Gandhi is not his teachings and not his great accomplishment in his movement. And our failure is not that we don't understand nonviolence and give talks on nonviolence and understand nonviolence, is we haven't gone as deep as Gandhi has. We have not captured Gandhi's spirit. In other words, we're not as serious as Thich Nhat Hanh. We're not as serious as Gandhi. And that's why I think when I meet Gandhi, he'll say, you're still doing the nonviolence of the weak. And this is hard stuff. And I'm sharing this not to give a talk. I'm reflecting with you on what my struggle is right now with Gandhi and nonviolence. Here's a fourth quote. This is, one of my favorite books. And Sander, I don't know if you remember Gandhi the Man by Eknath Easwaran. Bill McNichols used to give away dozens and dozens of these books to everybody. He probably gave you one at one point. He thinks it's the best book ever. Here's a quote. Gandhi trying to define nonviolence. Nonviolence in its dynamic condition means conscious suffering. Now, I used to say that in the 80s to large audiences, and so many people complained that I stopped because people don't understand the Christian language of the cross. They don't want to hear it. And maybe I shouldn't have stopped, but Martin Luther King, in every speech he ever gave, talked about taking up the cross. This is going to hurt to be against racism. We're going to accept suffering without a trace of the desire to retaliate with further suffering. In our pursuit of justice and disarmament, we don't run away, but we don't fight back and use the means of our opponent. We transform the whole thing through suffering love. And Gandhi said that every day of his life, and we don't talk about that here. Now listen to this, that's just the beginning. This does not mean meek submission to the will of the evildoer. There's no passivity here. And here's his definition of nonviolence, and I think Kathy, you will like this too, but wow. It means pitting one's whole soul against the will of the tyrant. And I've been pondering that for 40 years. He's saying you have to put your whole soul against the will of Trump. And you can not only end Trumpism, you can disarm and convert Trump, which he did with Jan Christian Smuts, which, by the way, was no joke, or some of the British. Working under this law of our being, it is possible, this is Gandhi, for a single individual to defy the whole might of an unjust empire, to save his honor, his religion, his soul, and lay the foundation for that empire's fall or regeneration into a nonviolent democracy. How about that? Isn't that fantastic? In other words, so what I'm struggling with on Gandhi's birthday is always how to go deeper. And it's a real struggle, friends. So when I talk about nonviolence, I've always said, yeah, it's a tactic and a strategy. It's a way of life. It's a spiritual path to the God of nonviolence. And Jim Lawson heard me in a speech once. He was Dr. King's friend. Dr. King called him the greatest teacher of nonviolence in the world. And Jim corrected me and said, you've missed one. Nonviolence is also, and this is what he and Martin used to talk about, a political methodology for positive social change that always works. Isn't that great? A methodology. So it's a spiritual path, it's a way of life, it's a tactic, it's a strategy, and it's a political methodology of national social movements that can transform. So I love all that. Well, anyway, if you're hanging in here with me, I wanted to say about this book, my book, The Nonviolent Life. And it's such a struggle for me. I was trying to figure out, how do you teach Gandhi and nonviolence to the masses in ordinary American language? So when I'm on the road, and Kathy knows this, so I came up with this formula that the holistic, total nonviolence of Gandhi and King requires 3 simultaneous attributes for the rest of your life. You have to do all 3. All 3 at the same time, and that's where the rub is. We do one of them if we're lucky, 2 if we're really good. Very few do all 3. 1, you have to be totally nonviolent to yourself from now on. This is very hard for Americans, and the Dalai Lama's been saying this. Americans are very, very sick people. And I mean everybody, black, white, rich, poor, we're all down the rabbit hole of inner violence and just clinging to it and internalizing it, and we're all wounded now, and we are just wounding each other, and we're beating ourselves up. How can we then work on inner nonviolence? At the same time, practicing meticulous interpersonal nonviolence toward every human being we meet, every human being on the planet, all the creatures, and Mother Earth. That's just the second point. In effect, total meticulous nonviolence from now on to all living beings, including Mother Earth. And third, you have to have one foot in the global grassroots movement. You have to be involved in it. Now, I say these three because a lot of people, I do a lot of work with the Buddhists in the United States. They're working really hard on inner nonviolence. If they're not working to get rid of nuclear weapons or racism or environmental destruction, that's not nonviolence, from Jesus to Buddha. On the other hand, there's a lot of us activists out there marching, and we're really angry, and we're really working, and we're not good at our inner nonviolence, and we're stepping on everybody's toes, and that's no good either, because that's not nonviolence either, you know? Gandhi reaches this holistic level of personal, interpersonal, and global. And what do you all think about that? How are you doing with that? For me, the inner nonviolence, I mean, I'm a very violent person. That's why I'm so committed to nonviolence, is trying to work on my violence, as my friends know. And that only works is through meditation and prayer. So Gandhi did it 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. He only read. I went to India with Arun Gandhi and lived in Gandhi's ashram, stayed there for a month. I went to all his places. He read from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2 and chapter 5 of Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, every morning, every evening for 45 years. I submit he may be the only person ever who read from the Sermon on the Mount every day of his life. And he's not a Christian. That's why he became Gandhi. So I've been giving retreats now on the Sermon on the Mount, and wrote books on it, and I'm trying to meditate like Gandhi did, and allowing God to disarm me, to go deeper and deeper. And it's great. And I could talk at length about that. I wonder what you all are doing to go really, really deep, to not get rid of your violence, but look at it, offer it up, let it go, allow the Holy Spirit, allow God, allow Jesus, however the image of your God of peace is, to disarm our hearts more and more, so we're instruments of God, and we can become that spiritual explosion in the world that Gandhi says is possible. Secondly, the interpersonal nonviolence. Just when I think I got it down, Kathy, I go and make some really stupid mistake. And I step on the toes of my friends, or I want to cut somebody off, and now I always have people mad at me, as Kathy knows. So I'm always working on it. And, my teaching is that the difficult people who push all your buttons are Gandhi for you. They're your teachers of nonviolence because they show how violent you still are. And thank God for them, and you get to work with them and let them disarm you and do your inner work. But how about the creatures? And how about Mother Earth? I wrote a book on climate change and nonviolence a couple years ago. Bill McKibben told me it's the first book to be written about that. He really liked it. And it's based on one sentence in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, those who practice total nonviolence, this is the translation of the Greek, I'm convinced, are one with Mother Earth. That's an incredible breakthrough teaching. And I've been studying the Sermon on the Mount for 30 years, and I never realized that's what he was saying. So that's what the thesis of my book I didn't make up. Of course, if you practice total violence, you're totally disconnected with Mother Earth, catastrophic climate change. Jesus said that right in the Sermon on the Mount. So all of this makes great sense. And I live in California now, and I do a lot of walking in nature as part of my spiritual practice. Gandhi did 20 miles a day, some say. Third, being part of the global movement and deepening it. And what we need is a global grassroots movement of nonviolence, the likes of which the world has never seen. Now, I hope you've all studied Erica Chenoweth. She's the #1 scholar on the planet on movements. She's now gone way beyond Gene Sharp. Foreign Affairs magazine says she's one of the 10 greatest intellectuals on the planet. She meets with the UN and the State Department all the time. She's just been given a full chair at Harvard. Her book, Why Civil Resistance Works, Jim Lawson said, is hands down the most important book in the century. And I agree, because she proves from 1900 to 2006, she studied with her team every war and revolution in the world. And the book is like reading the phone book. It's all statistics. She proves where nonviolence was tried, it worked. incredible, very hopeful. The name of the book is Why Civil Resistance Works. You can type that in, Portia, for everybody, by Chenoweth, Erica Chenoweth. And you can Google her, and it's must reading for all of us. Actually, Jim said, there's Gandhi, then Erica Chenoweth, then Dr. King. And he was Dr. King's best friend. Well, anyway, my point is the movement, the global grassroots movement. Now, Erica, we just had a national conference on nonviolence last month with 700 people, and it was great with Erica spoken. She said, Black Lives Matter is the biggest movement in US history, 26,000 members, 98% of it totally nonviolent. And the media is saying it was all violent. Of course, so they're really going after nonviolence. And Ken Budigan talks about this a lot. I find a lot of hope in that. I find a lot of hope in the Parkland kids. I think they were very Gandhian in the way they were able to touch the nerve in the country and mobilize a national movement against gun violence. I find a lot of hope in Greta Thunberg and the young people on strike, having millions of people on strike, young kids. This is huge for the climate. And I've gotten involved this last year with Jane Fonda and Fire Drill Fridays. I invite you to Google that and start following her Facebook conferences. She's doing phenomenal work, and she's got almost 1 million people listening on her Zoom calls now. She's bringing in the leading thinkers on the planet. And her plan is a nonviolent army to shut down Congress. This is very Gandhian. My group, Campaign Nonviolence, has been doing really great work. But again, the movement. That's why in the last 15 years, I mean, you haven't even, I'm a Catholic priest, and I don't think I've mentioned the Catholic Church once yet, or any of the churches. And that's because I think Jesus was a movement organizer and wants us building this global grassroots movement of nonviolence, and that is the church, if you will. That's the community of the nonviolent Jesus. But Ken and I got the Pope to write the first statement on nonviolence in history, so I'm kind of hopeful too. So, you want me to stop, Sander?
No. Kathy has a question. Kathy Kelly's question.
Yeah, let me just give my 2 little points, and then I'll call on Kathy. How about that?
Okay,
Can
great.
you hold on there, Kathy? I saw her question.
Okay, good.
No, it's just one more, which is how can we teach and spread nonviolence more and more? This is my question for the 3 of you. How can we deepen nonviolence? How can we grow the movement? And how do we teach and spread nonviolence? That's a very important question, I think. And it's one we all need to grapple with. We need to be on social media and Facebook more. I know we're trying to live it. I know we're doing demonstrations. I know we're writing articles and books, but I wonder. Okay, those are my 3 comments. Now open it up. Kathy, go ahead. And tell me what you think, Kathy, besides, and hi, how are you? Unmute yourself.
You want me to unmute her? I could also
unmute her.
I will unmute her. I will do so.
Well, great to hear you, John, and thank you for all of those thoughts. But I wonder if you could find some time before you end your presentation to talk about the time when, following the Hindu-Muslim massacres, this terrible time when Gandhi's dreams were falling apart. What did he do? Could you describe that?
Sure, I'd love to. And then thank you for me. Does everybody know what Kathy is talking about when Gandhi was in Noakhali? If you don't, raise your hand. I know there's only 7 of us, but okay, so Portia. So it just boggles the mind. I think it was, I can double check, and it's 1948, right? So Gandhi's in prison doing a life sentence for being against World War II. His wife dies and his secretary dies. And Gandhi was really depressed, almost suicidal. I don't know if you all know that. And I've learned lately that it was because of the death of his wife. And he sees that everything is going to hell in a handbasket. The British are clearly going to leave, and but the Muslims want their own country, and it was a total ego trip of the leadership. It was so evil what happened, the split of East and West Pakistan. the formation of that, in my opinion. And the history books, I think, would agree that. So as the independence is approaching, August 1948, Gandhi's killed, August 1947, and Gandhi's killed in January 1948, okay? So around that time, just before independence in 1946, the riots are happening, and eventually all hell breaks out, and a million people are killed. Hindus killing Muslims, Muslims killing Hindus. They don't have guns, so they have machetes. And it was really horrific, and Gandhi just was given up. And then later he fasted to the death in Calcutta and ended that. Before he did that, the thing that was not in the Gandhi movie, which many people consider the greatest accomplishment of his life, what Kathy's talking about. So there's no phones, there's no faxes, there's no books. It's present day Bangladesh, probably then and now the poorest place in the world. And they have never heard of Gandhi. That's what's important to remember in the story. Kathy, he's like 77 years old. So the whole thing about age is baloney. And Gandhi says he's gonna walk through war-torn Noakhali and end the war. I mean, they're just total massacres. Think Rwanda. That's the one thing we've had in our lifetime. That was it. People chopping off each other's heads. 1 million people dead in Rwanda, 1 million people dead in that part of the world. And he's gonna leave, and he has 9 companions. Kathy, did I ever tell you this story? And so the BBC comes up to him. Now, all he's got is his walking stick. Literally, he has nothing. And he's got these awful flip-flops, wooden sandals, and he's gonna walk 10 miles a day. Gonna walk 10 miles a day. Some of his friends are going on ahead and say, a holy man is coming, bring everybody together, Hindus and Muslims, and he's gonna talk about how we can end this and work forward, and he's gonna teach nonviolence to them. And when he gets there, if they are going to be mean or fighting, he won't speak. And he'll go into a hut, and he says, I'll try again tomorrow. And if it's by the 5th day, there are whole villages sitting there, and they are totally nonviolent. And then he starts to speak. It's incredible. But anyway, he said, the BBC reporter says at the beginning of this, Mr. Gandhi, listen, I know you're a very impressive person, but excuse me, there's millions among millions of people killing each other over there. So all of present day Bangladesh, there's only 10 of you. Who do you think you are? What good can 10 of you do? And Kathy, Gandhi leans into the microphone and says to the BBC guy, that's 9 more than I need. You hear me? Isn't that amazing? So this is the thing that I grapple with about Gandhi. He talked about the indomitable will of one person to change the world. So he walked. It ended up being about 9 months. He got malaria several times. I mean, think of the food, the dysentery, the sicknesses. He only has 9 friends. They don't even speak his language. There's like hundreds of different languages. And he goes village to village. After every village, they all put down their weapons and they pledge nonviolence totally to one another and for the rest of their lives. And he ends all the killing in Noakhali. It's one of the greatest miracles in human history, and very few people know about it. Kathy, thanks for raising that. Does that get at your question, or do you want to talk about it a little bit more? Did you have something you want to say about that?
Well, I think there's been a good theme of rebellion in much of what we've heard today. And in a way, Gandhi's rebellion against the bloodshed and the massacre is so perfectly described, John, by you in your book, but also thank you for this description right now. And I felt that it was an important reminder for us in terms of that indomitable will that Gandhi represented. It's a good challenge, isn't it?
Isn't it great, Kathy? So you all know Kathy. She's been to Iraq 400 times and Afghanistan 4,000 times. and she made me go to Afghanistan. And Kathy, it's like that. You're walking through Iraq and walking through Afghanistan, or it's like walking through Detroit or Camden, New Jersey. I don't know how we translate that, but he used that phrase, indomitable will, a lot. And I was actually teaching this young kid friend of mine last week because of Bill Sanders. I went and bought this book for him, Fighting the Man.
Great. For those who don't understand the inside references, we're talking about Father Bill McNichols, another former Jesuit, but still a Catholic priest. Who's also
good friend of ours. Yeah.
A good friend of ours who's also an iconographer, an artist. Yeah, makes modern but traditional icons of the saints, radical saints.
My friend picked out throughout the book in the Gandhi quotes. He's saying Gandhi's talking about willpower. Positive willpower. You forget Trump. We are going to make a difference. Now, you won't, Kathy and Sandra know me, I'm a big name dropper. All the great people I've met are like that. Mother Teresa, Tutu, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Berrigans, I could go on, and they're like, we can do these things. And I keep trying to psych myself up, but I don't know if that's it. Is that what it is to have an indomitable will? I think my indomitable will drives people crazy, Kathy. Do you want to say what that means for you, Kathy? You see what we're talking about here, that Gandhi can go into Noakhali and try to make a difference. Who thinks like that? Except for you.
Listen, John, sorry, Kathy, I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, we almost cavalierly expected of young people that go off into the military.
Right.
Help for a heavenly cause kind of thing. And so if we can expect of the nonviolent campaigners, and I think it's true about Black Lives Matter, they're showing it to us. They are. They're leading us, and let us be led.
Yeah, amen. Sandra, are you going to say something? I wanted to say one little story at some point, but I know about my time. Have I used up my time?
Yes, but I also screwed up because in the schedule, what was supposed to happen is Edward de Jesus was actually supposed to go after Les and before you, Father John. But Les was so great about Urantia and Jesus and cosmology, I felt like that you were just naturally going to come up next. But I wanted to ask Edward de Jesus if he could turn his camera on and we could have you also join the discussion, especially because you were talking about Black Lives Matter, and Edward also urged us to be cognizant of racial diversity and as we struggle against racism as a part of this. So I'm not trying to be strict about who's speaking when anymore, but I am trying to also make Ed de Jesus a part of this discussion about Jesus and Gandhi. Yeah. So Ed, this is Father John and Kathy Kelly, and Portia. And and one last correction, Father John, it's not just 7 people participating. We actually have 21 people participating, plus I put you on Facebook Live, so there's a million people.
7,000. Okay, never mind. Sorry about that. Yeah. I'm wrong about money things. Hi, Ed. Nice to meet you. I'm John. So I can stop, and Ed can talk unless, Chandra, you want me to take 1 or 2 questions, and we can just move on to Ed. What would you like?
I think, let's see if there's any questions for Father John. You did get a lot of great comments from people. People were texting me and messaging me and saying this is great. So we're really hitting our stride here. I'm really grateful for everybody participating. But since you're talking about indomitable will, Ed de Jesus is also using nonviolence to do workforce development with kids in the inner city, youth, young people in the inner city. So I thought that might also be a good segue to Ed. We had a question from somebody to Father John or the group about might you compare or contrast with Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the guy that tried to assassinate Adolf Hitler? Or is that a tangent? I don't know, maybe that's a tangent.
Whatever you want, Chan. Do you want me to say a word on that?
No, I think it's a tangent. because
Well,
Dietrich
I'm just
Bonhoeffer.
gonna, let me say
Yeah,
a word, just
go
that,
ahead.
do you all know, we all know Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And it's hard to grasp that Dietrich Bonhoeffer would be like one of the Kennedys. His family was so big in Germany, so important. And then one of the Kennedys becomes the leading Christian in all of Germany. It's hard, that's the way Bonhoeffer was. He was so great and important. And of course, the plot to kill Hitler happens. And so what did he do? Bonhoeffer writes to Gandhi. And I put two of Gandhi's letters to Bonhoeffer in my book. There were more. Bonhoeffer came to Harlem to work for a while, and Gandhi wrote, and Gandhi got immediately, because he's Gandhi, who he's corresponding with. And Bonhoeffer, he says to Bonhoeffer, stop what you're doing. Come to me. Live with me for 1 year. I'll pay all your expenses if you can get here. It's going to be rough. I will teach you everything, and you go back and lead the nonviolent revolution against the Nazis. And Bonhoeffer chose not to do it and went back and joined the violent plan. And that to me is always very interesting, that Gandhi really tried to reach out to him. And if you read Bonhoeffer's letters from prison, Bonhoeffer says, I was wrong. Don't do what I did. I am committing mortal sin. I take that very seriously. Bonhoeffer did the wrong thing. He should have been like Franz Jägerstätter, who did the right thing. The unknown, uneducated farmer from Austria who refused to fight for Hitler is one of only 5 people in Austria who refused to join the Nazis when the Anschluss happened, and he was taken off and beheaded, and he's been beatified now. Anyway, that's a little thing of history, which I think is important for people to know. Maybe that's enough from me then, Sander, and we can go on to Ed.
Thank you, Father John. It's great to hear you. Your words
Yeah,
were
thanks,
really,
everybody.
yeah. Thank you, because you really changed my life by bringing me into Gandhi 16 years ago. So really, this whole conference is really because of your work with Gandhi and Jesus. And so thank you, Father.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks.
Email is artisan3@gmail, and it's in the chat to everyone. And I also spelled the correct spelling of Urantia book, which basically means earth book.